Hello and welcome back to Tasha Could Make That. Today we're knee deep in the Wondrella cardigan knit along, knitting my batwing sleeve vintage style cardigan together. Watch the intro video if you'd like to follow along later. I'll put a card in the upper right hand corner for that. All the content will still be relevant then, and the first two videos will also be linked in this video description. Today's video is our big upper body video for Wondrella. We're going to cover dividing the body at the armholes, knitting the upper body, the shoulder join, the neck finishing options, and knitting the neckties. That's a lot to cover, so let's get going. If you've never knit a seamless sweater before, dividing the body at the armholes is really a very simple concept. If you were knitting a sweater flat, like this, and seaming the pieces, at the underarm for each part, you'd usually bind off some stitches, then shape the armhole with decreases, and keep knitting either up the front or the back, whichever piece you're working on. You do the same thing for a seamless sweater, but instead, when you get to the armhole, you bind off the stitches for both that you would have done if you were knitting them separate, and then you place the stitches for the pieces you're not working on and you're going to work on later on hold. For Wondrella, that means you knit across the right front stitches, bind off for the right armhole, knit across the back stitches, bind off for the left armhole, and then knit across the front left. And then you place the back and the right stitches on hold and keep knitting up the left. Then when you're done knitting the upper left body, you'll pick the stitches back up for the front right, knit the front right upper body, and then do the same thing for the back. So in the end, your piece will look roughly like that, instead of if you were knitting the sweater flat and having three separate pieces. After you divide the body, you'll work all the armhole shaping rows and then move into the slit neckline edging section of the pattern. So after the armhole shaping, at the beginning of this section, the pattern has you knit some rows in stockinette stitch before the neckline edging itself starts. So for sizes that have a lot of armhole shaping, you won't be knitting very many stockinette rows because you'll have already knit several rows of armhole shaping. So as little as 6 rows of stockinette. And for sizes with very little armhole shaping, like my size, that'll be as many as 26 rows. So I actually put in a locking stitch marker just so I could count 26 rows here the lazy way, instead of actually, marking it on a row counter, or what I do is just little check marks usually. So this was to count my 26 rows here. And just to show you on my original sweater, the armhole shaping is done here, and what we're talking about is these rows of stockinette before we start the neckline edging that will start after the button bands. Of course, we'll knit the button bands later, but this is the neckline edging section that I'm talking about right now. Keep in mind that if you opted to lengthen or shorten the depth of the slit neckline opening, which I talked about in our last video, I'll put a card for that in the upper right corner. The number of stockinette rows before this neckline edging starts next will actually be a little bit different for you, so make sure to use that number instead. So just before you begin this neckline edging, which is super simple to work, I have you place a locking stitch marker into the first stitch in the row at the center front. So I'm working on the left side first, and so my center front is on the left side of my row. So here is my little locking stitch marker. This stays in the piece, that's why it's a locking stitch marker and not a marker that you place actually on the needle. So this stays in place until the very end when you knit the button bands. And don't worry, if you take this out on accident at some point, it's really not a big deal. We'll talk about that in the next video. I mentioned that because I believe I have done that at least once so far. So don't worry about it if you accidentally do it. But don't forget that locking stitch marker will mark the beginning of your neckline shaping and later on where you'll pick up your stitches for your button band. So after we place that locking stitch marker into the first stitch at the neckline edge at the center front, then we're going to work 2 rows of our neckline edging setup, and then we're going to jump into our neckline edging, which will work all the way up until we get to our neckline shaping. Okay, so you finished the left front neckline edging section of the pattern, and I recommend you measure to make sure that you're on track. I give the measurements from the underarm bind off in the pattern up to this. So for my size, the piece is supposed to measure 8¼ inches from the underarm bind off to the end of the neckline edging section. My row gauge was actually just a little bit off, so I had to knit a couple more rows to get to 8¼ inches. Well, actually, technically, I frogged back to this spot because I was watching a show and I was just knitting on and blazed right past that. So if you're a little short or a little long, just knit a little bit more or frog a few rows so you hit the right length in the pattern. Hey, whether you're participating in the Wondrella knit along or not, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So I'm ready to get into my neckline shaping. We're so close to the end of the left front here. One more thing I wanted to mention though is that if your neckline edging is rolling in like mine is, don't worry about that at all because when you block the sweater, it'll lay nice and flat and look perfect on your body. Let's talk about the neckline shaping for just a second. It doesn't matter whether you're doing the collared version or the plain neckband version, both shape the neckline in exactly the same way. So first you bind off some stitches and then you work a few decrease rows and then you knit some plain rows in stockinette and boom, you're done, you're at the shoulder. And the cool thing about modified drop shoulders is that there is no shoulder shaping. So once you've finished with the neckline shaping, you're done with the left front. So all I have left is to break the yarn and leave a long tail for the 3-needle bind off later and put the stitches on hold, and then you move on to the right front. So I just finished my left front. These are the stitches that are on hold for the back, which we'll do after the right front. And then I'm just going to place the right front stitches back on the needle so I can knit the right front. And don't forget that you start the right front and then later the back on a wrong side row, because when we did the body divide row, that was on a right side row. So then the first row you worked for the left front upper body was a right side row. So that first row that you'll knit after you pick up the stitches for the right front and then later for the back, that will be a wrong side row. I have my right front knit now and my back too. The back is a breeze since it's just armhole shaping and then knitting to the length of the fronts. There's no shoulder shaping since this is a modified drop shoulder, so when you hit that length, you're ready for the shoulder join. So at this point the body is done and you're going to join the right shoulder first with a 3-needle bind off, then place the back neckline stitches on hold and then join the left shoulders with a 3-needle bind off. 3-needle bind off is a great finish to give you a shoulder seam without needing to actually seam anything together by hand. I give you detailed instructions in the pattern on the 3-needle bind off, and I just did a full tutorial walkthrough here on YouTube, so the card to link to that video will be in the upper right corner so you can watch the full thing on this sweater. After joining the right shoulder, you'll place the back neckline stitches on hold and then join the left shoulders. I like to put a stitch marker on the needle when I put the back neckline stitches on hold, just to indicate the number of shoulder stitches so I know exactly when to stop and then where I will resume for the shoulder. Now you can see that our shoulders are joined, our back neck stitches are on hold to work the neckline edging, and the entire body of Wondrella is done. Yay! Moving on to the neck finishing. And you know, if you're following along in the pattern, you might be like, why aren't we talking about button bands next, since that's the next thing in the actual pattern itself? And frankly, it's because I forgot. And at this point, it was already in the schedule. So you get button bands in the next video. Doesn't really matter what you do first though. So there's two options in the pattern for how you want to finish off the neckline, but picking up stitches for both options is exactly the same. You'll use your smaller size needles and pick up stitches along the neckline starting at the center front of the right piece, going up and around to the back neck where you'll have put the back neck stitches on hold, so you'll put those on the needle and then knit across them, then back down the left side and around back to the center front. So I tell you how many stitches to pick up in the pattern, but here's a little secret. Do I ever follow the exact number of stitches I'm told to pick up in a pattern? Nope. Do I follow it for other people's patterns? Nope. Do I follow it for my own patterns? Only when I'm knitting the samples. Am I knitting a sample and following it right now? Nope. So I'm not going to lie and pretend like I'm actually paying attention here. So if you get close to, but not quite to the right number of stitches, don't worry about it. Just make sure you end up with an odd number of stitches on your needles. And now I have all my stitches picked up for the neckline. Now if you're going to knit the neckband per the pattern, all you're going to do is knit 6 rows in 1x1 ribbing and bind off. I'm going to knit the collar for this blue one. So that just means that working from the pattern, I'll knit 2 rows in ribbing, and then I'll start working increases at either end of the collar in the ribbing, every 4 rows, 5 times total, and then bind off. Easy. So I'll see you after the collar's done. And look, here's my cute collar. Don't forget that if you knit the dagger collar modification, when you block the cardigan at the end, you'll pin these points down. You can actually pin the points out too for the regular collar if you'd like as well. And this will look a little bit nicer when it's all blocked. Last but not least for today's video, we have our neckties. So I've obviously knit one here, and you can see that the necktie just comes right from the join between the collar or the neckband if you knit the neckband, and the neckline edging just at the top of where that shaping bind off row was. If you've never knit an Icord before, it's actually really fun and easy. You have to use a circular needle or a DPN though, and you'll see why in a second. Start by picking up 2 stitches right at the edge where the collar or the neckband joins the body. So 1 stitch at the edge of the collar or the neckband and 1 stitch at the end of the neckline edging. So I'll pick up my 2 stitches here. There's 1. Get the tail out of the way. And there's my second one. Don't turn your work after you pick up these 2 stitches. This is why you need a DPN or a circular. So slide them to the other end of the needle. In my case, it's circular, so it takes a little longer. And then you're going to knit these 2 stitches. Knit them kind of snug. You'll need to snug up that tail a little bit. You'll obviously weave that in later. And you've knit 2 stitches, and you slide your needle back around, and you keep going. Knit that first stitch, pull it a little snug on the tail, knit the second one, and keep on going. Always remember to pull that first stitch a little snug after you knit it so that you don't get kind of a loose yarn in the back of this. And you'll just keep on going for the full length. So I have about 1 inch knit on my second necktie. When the ties are about 14 inches long, cut the yarn and thread it onto a needle and pull the tail through both of the 2 stitches a few times like you would at the top of a bottom-up hat. Pull kind of tight at the end to tighten up the stitches, and that will close the bottom of the Icord. And we are about done for today. I sure hope you found today's video helpful. I never knew how much I'd have to think through ahead of time to remember to knit very specific parts of the cardigan on camera and not forget and blaze right past them in my knitting. We'll meet back in about 2 weeks for our last meaty video of the knit along, where we'll cover button bands, the sleeves, and blocking our finished sweaters. Yay! Then we'll have just one more video after that in about 2 weeks, our wrap-up video. We're looking at about April 5th or so for the wrap-up of the knit along. So if you're knitting along Wondrella with us and think you'll be finished by then, please reach out to me if you'd like to be included in the final video. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy knitting. Bye.